Rook sat down 12 feet from the school bus and refused to move. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer stopped so abruptly the leash snapped tight between them. The Dutch Shepherd had not been told to sit. His sable body had gone rigid, mouth closed, ears forward, nose angled toward the lower rear quarter of the bus. Then his eyes locked beneath the chassis. Daniel felt his stomach drop. That was Rook's trained final response. Explosive odor. Again. 20 minutes earlier, Rook had given the same response near the rear of the bus. EOD had searched the vehicle and found nothing. A second detection dog had cleared it. Now Rook had sat again, and Daniel's 17-year-old daughter was standing behind the security barrier, waiting to get on that bus. Mercer? Captain Eric Vale's voice came from behind him. Daniel did not turn. Call your dog off. Rook remained perfectly still. Beyond the temporary fencing, 26 high school students from Colorado Springs waited with teachers and Army escorts after a JROTC career day at Fort Carson. Daniel found Grace immediately. Gray sweatshirt, dark ponytail, arms crossed. She was staring directly at him. An hour earlier, Daniel had promised he would finish the vehicle sweep, meet her outside the visitor center, and take her to dinner. No work phone, no Army talk, just dinner. A small promise. But Daniel had broken enough small promises since the divorce to know that promises were rarely small to the person waiting. Captain Vale stepped beside him. EOD cleared this bus 20 minutes ago. I know. Mendoza's dog cleared it too. I know. Vale lowered his voice. Yesterday, Rook showed interest on a maintenance truck, and we found nothing. Interest isn't a final response. You know what I'm saying? Daniel did. Rook was 8 years old, still certified and still healthy, but old enough that every hesitation invited questions. 3 weeks earlier, an evaluator had suggested Daniel might have unconsciously influenced Rook during a training problem after noticing suspicious cargo himself. The criticism had stayed with him. A handler who stopped trusting his dog was useless. A handler who trusted him blindly could become dangerous. Vale looked at Rook, reset him, one clean pass from another direction. If he doesn't reproduce, we're done. Daniel nodded. Yes, sir. He shortened the leash. Rook, heel. The dog rose immediately. No confusion, no reluctance. The certainty bothered Daniel almost as much as the alert. They moved 30 yards away. Daniel gave him water, waited while EOD personnel repositioned, then approached the bus from the opposite side. He stopped at the front corner. Seek. Rook went to work. Tires, wheel wells, cargo seams, door frame. His nose moved with the slow discipline of thousands of repetitions. He passed the spot where he had alerted before. Daniel felt the pressure in his chest ease. Maybe Vale had been right. Maybe trace odor had drifted. Maybe Rook stopped, not at the rear axle, at the driver's entrance. His nose lifted. He worked the folding door, caught something higher, and pulled Daniel toward a dark blue rain jacket. Hanging behind the driver's seat, Rook sat. The driver stared through the windshield. What the hell? Daniel stamped back. Captain Vale swore under his breath. Daniel rewarded Rook with his black rubber Kong, then moved him away from the vehicle. The change in the dog was immediate. Rook grabbed the toy. His tail loosened, his body relaxed. To him, the job was complete. That mattered to Daniel. Rook was not anxious. He was not looking to Daniel for confirmation. He believed he had done exactly what he had been trained to do. Vale joined him. Could be contamination. Absolutely. The drivers had been around Army equipment all afternoon. Possible. Trace explosive odor could travel on gloves, clothing, vehicle interiors, and tools. A dog could detect trained odor without there being a bomb. Rook could identify odor. He could not identify guilt. Daniel looked toward the bus, but contamination still came from somewhere. Tech Sergeant Luis Herrera from EOD approached the driver's entrance wearing gloves. The civilian driver climbed down. His name was Warren Pike, heavy-set, late 40s, sweat already forming along his hairline despite the cool afternoon. I've driven this contract 11 years, Pike said. I don't carry explosives. Herrera barely looked up. Nobody said you did. That dog did, Daniel answered. No, he said he smelled something he was trained to detect. Pike stared at him. Same difference. It isn't. Something shifted in Pike's face, not anger anymore. Nervousness. Daniel noticed. Herrera removed the rain jacket and sealed it for testing. Mr. Pike, where was this jacket yesterday? Pike hesitated. In my truck. Personal vehicle? Yes. And before that? Another pause. Garage, maybe. Rook, now beside Daniel with the Kong in his mouth, turned his head. His nose moved toward Pike's boots. Vale saw it. Don't. Daniel didn't. No search command, no final response. Only interest. Daniel shortened the lead and let it go. Grace pulled out her phone behind the barrier. A second later, Daniel's phone vibrated. Her message read, "Are we ever leaving?" He typed back, "I don't know yet." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. A moment later, another message came through. Mom was right. Work always wins. Daniel stared at the words. He could explain deployments, duty rosters, emergency call-outs, nights when Rook had helped soldiers get home alive. None of that changed what Grace remembered. An empty chair at her choir concert, a birthday video call from Kuwait, her mother taking her to the emergency room while Daniel handled an overnight search. He put the phone away. Captain Vale had seen enough of his expression to understand. That's your daughter? Yes, sir. Vale looked toward the students. Then you understand why we need facts, not instinct. Daniel looked down at Rook. This isn't instinct. It isn't proof either. No, sir. Vale seemed almost surprised by the answer. Daniel continued. But I'm not comfortable putting 26 kids on that vehicle until EOD is satisfied. Vale's jaw tightened. You're not the release authority. I know. Then remember your lane. The words landed harder because Vale didn't raise his voice. Daniel had spent 19 years learning how far judgment could stretch before it became insubordination. He stepped back. Yes, sir. Herrera swabbed the driver's doorway, the floor threshold, and several contact surfaces. 10 minutes later, he emerged from the mobile EOD vehicle carrying 2 preliminary test strips. His expression had changed. Vale walked toward him. What? The jacket and the bus threshold both show explosive residue. The lane went quiet. From the demonstration area? Vale asked. Herrera shook his head. Doesn't match the background contamination we've been seeing today. Daniel looked through the barrier at Grace. The anger had disappeared from her face. Now she looked afraid. Herrera turned to Pike. Mr. Pike, we need to know everywhere you've been since yesterday. Pike said nothing. Then his eyes flicked toward the parking lot. Daniel followed them. Outside the checkpoint, a dark pickup had just stopped. The driver remained inside. Captain Vale saw it too. You expecting someone? Pike answered too quickly. No. Daniel watched the pickup, then Pike. For the first time, the problem felt larger than a contaminated jacket. Security moved the students back into the visitor center while military police closed the bus lane. Grace disappeared inside without sending another message. Daniel clipped Rook onto a shorter lead. Pike stood near the bus with his arms folded tightly over his chest. The dark pickup remained outside the checkpoint. Security police ran the plate. Summit Range Services, a regional demolition, land clearing, and construction contractor operating across southern Colorado. Daniel recognized the name. Summit had supported several projects near Fort Carson. The driver finally got out. Cole Maddox was in his early 50s, square-built and gray at the temples, wearing a company jacket and work boots, polished too carefully for someone who spent his days around demolition sites. He approached the gate with the confidence of a man accustomed to walking into rooms already expecting to be listened to. I'm Warren Pike's operations manager. Vale met him. Why are you here? Warren called me. Pike looked at the pavement. When? Vale asked. Before you took his phone. Nobody had taken Pike's phone. Herrera looked at Daniel. Daniel had caught it too. Maddox corrected himself. Before this became a federal production. It's an installation security issue. It's residue. Explosive residue? Maddox shrugged. We're a demolition contractor. Half my yard probably has residue somewhere. Herrera stepped closer. What materials does Summit use? Commercial blasting products. Whatever permitted jobs require. Date cord? Sometimes. Boosters? When required. Maddox's gaze moved to Rook. Your dog is old. Daniel's grip tightened. Vale answered instead. The dog is certified. For now. That bothered Daniel, not because it was insulting, because Maddox knew. Someone had either talked to him about Rook or Maddox had started asking questions the moment Pike called. Vale noticed the same thing. You seem unusually familiar with Sergeant Mercer's dog. I know how contracting works around military installations. Maddox turned to Pike. Tell them what happened. Pike swallowed. I drove through the summit yard last night. Why? I do some weekend driving for them and Maddox's face hardened. Warren. Pike kept going. My regular job doesn't cover everything. He looked toward the visitor center. My wife's on dialysis. The hostility around him changed. Daniel had expected deception. He hadn't expected shame. Pike rubbed his palms against his pants. I move crews, tools, equipment. Herrera asked, what did you move last night? Pike went quiet. Maddox stepped in. He doesn't have to discuss company operations without counsel. Vale looked at him. He's not under arrest. Neither am I. No. Vale pointed toward the gate. So you're free to leave. Maddox stayed exactly where he was. Daniel understood. Maddox had not come to rescue Pike. He had come to control what Pike said. Pike stared at the ground. 2 cases. Herrera's eyes sharpened. What kind? Black polymer cases, maybe 2 feet long. What's inside? I was told survey equipment. From where to where? Summit's south yard to a storage shed near Red Mesa. Vale frowned. The old quarry area? Private land just outside the Army boundary. Daniel knew it. Dry scrub, old blasting pits, service roads, equipment sheds, and years of legitimate explosive use. Herrera asked, who loaded the cases? Pike glanced at Maddox. That was answer enough. Maddox gave a short laugh. This is getting absurd. Pike's shoulders dropped. Daniel had seen that posture before. Soldiers who had decided the lie was costing more energy than the truth. Those weren't the first cases. Maddox went completely still. Vale turned back to Pike. How many trips? I don't know. Estimate, 15, maybe 20. Over what period? 6 months. Herrera exchanged a look with Vale. Always Red Mesa? No. Pike's voice was barely audible. Some went to other summit sites. He stopped. Daniel waited. Pike looked toward the visitor center again. One went to the County Emergency Communications Center. Daniel felt the air leave his chest. His ex-wife Laura worked there. Vale asked, when? Last week. Maddox cut in. Enough. Pike flinched. That single movement told Daniel more than anything Maddox had said. Vale stepped between them. Mr. Maddox, back away. Maddox didn't move. Summit employs 83 people, but he said. His control was beginning to crack. Veterans, families, people with mortgages. We lost 2 major quarry contracts this quarter. We have equipment sitting idle and Army bids coming up for renewal. You suspend us over trace residue, and you don't just hurt me. There it was. Daniel filed the detail away. 2 lost contracts, idle equipment, a company under pressure. Maddox pointed toward Rook. An aging dog smells something on one employee's coat, and suddenly everyone's livelihood is on the line. Daniel spoke calmly. Rook detected trained odor. He pointed toward Herrera. EOD confirmed residue. Then toward Vale. Everything after that belongs to investigators. Maddox looked at him with open dislike. Maddox could argue with accusations and theories. A simple sequence of facts gave him nothing to attack. Security investigators arrived. Maddox was told he could leave. As he passed Pike, he leaned close enough to say, call your wife before you make your situation worse. Pike went pale. Maddox walked toward his pickup. Daniel watched him drive away. Then Pike whispered, last week wasn't the only county run. Herrera turned. What? Pike looked exhausted. There was another delivery 3 weeks ago. Same location? Yes. Same cases? Same type. Daniel's phone was already in his hand. Vale saw him. Mercer. Daniel stopped. Investigative chain, jurisdiction, his lane. But Laura was not an investigator to him. She was Grace's mother, and she might be sitting beside whatever Pike had delivered. Pike continued. Maddox went back himself yesterday. Daniel looked at Vale. He said something at the county site needed to be removed before an inspection. Daniel felt something cold settle behind his ribs. This wasn't just old contamination anymore. Someone had moved controlled material into a secure facility, and yesterday the owner of a struggling demolition company had gone back to retrieve something before anybody looked too closely. Daniel called Laura before anyone could stop him. She answered on the second ring. If this is about Grace, I'm about to leave for Carson. It's not about Grace. Silence. Daniel heard keyboards and radio traffic behind her. What happened? Has Summit Range Services been inside your compound? Another silence. Different this time. Who told you that? Daniel closed his eyes. 16 years of marriage had taught him when Laura was thinking, and when she was deciding how much truth she could safely give him. One of their drivers. Daniel, are you on the speaker? No. Then listen carefully. Don't come here. His hand tightened around the phone. Why? Because if military police are calling the sheriff, I don't need my ex-husband arriving with an explosives dog and taking over. I'm not taking over. You don't know how not to. He almost argued, stopped himself. What happened? Laura exhaled. 3 weeks ago, I found a contractor entry that didn't match any approved work order. What entry? A Summit truck came through our rear service gate at 2:13 in the morning. Who let them in? A contract maintenance supervisor. What did they deliver? Security video showed 2 black cases. Daniel looked across the lane toward Pike. Same description. Did you report it? Yes. To who? My director. Facilities. Security. And? They told me Summit had been doing generator work and someone coded the entry wrong. You believe that? No. Then why didn't you call me? Laura answered immediately. Because we're divorced, Daniel. He said nothing. And because every time something feels dangerous, you stop being a father or a husband or even a person in the room. You become Staff Sergeant Mercer. The words were quiet. That made them worse. You take control. You stop hearing everyone else. Daniel looked at Rook. The dog lay at his boots chewing the Kong, as though the world had no problems beyond whether Daniel might throw it again. What happened after you reported the delivery? My access to contractor records was restricted. By your director? Yes. Daniel felt anger rise. Laura heard it. Don't. I'm not doing anything. You're already doing it. Daniel loosened his hand, forced his voice down. What else? Yesterday, Maddox came here personally. Daniel straightened. What did he want? Access to the rear compound tonight. He said Summit needed to remove obsolete generator hardware before a county inspection tomorrow. Did you approve it? No. What did he say? He reminded me our department budget review is next month. There was the pressure, not a threat, just a reminder. Maddox did not need to say what could happen to people who made trouble for an important contractor. Daniel looked toward Captain Vale. Laura, do you have authority to move your staff? Not because your dog alerted on a jacket. Then don't do it because of Rook. She went silent. Daniel continued. Do it because an unauthorized contractor delivered sealed cases into a secure compound. Somebody restricted your access after you reported it, and now the same contractor wants those cases removed before an inspection. Another pause. Longer. That's the first reasonable thing you've said to me in months. The call ended. Daniel wasn't sure whether he'd just been complimented. Captain Vale approached. The county sheriff has been notified. Bomb squad is taking the off-post lead. Daniel nodded. Laura confirmed an unauthorized Summit delivery. Vale stopped. You contacted her? Yes, sir. I told you investigators were taking this. She's my daughter's mother. And a potential witness. Daniel accepted it. Yes, sir. You give her information? Only what affected immediate safety. I told her to follow facility procedure and defer to local law enforcement. Vale studied him. You still stepped outside the chain. I did. Daniel didn't defend himself further. An hour later, the school bus was cleared after decontamination and a substitute driver was brought in. Grace did not get on it. Laura came herself. She crossed the parking area in her county badge with Grace several steps behind. Grace went to Rook first. The Dutch Shepherd stood and pressed his shoulder against her leg. She scratched beneath his collar. You ruined dinner too. Rook leaned harder. Daniel almost smiled. Laura didn't. The county evacuated the rear administrative wing. Bomb squad there? Yes. Did they find the cases? Not where the delivery entries said they were. Daniel frowned. The maintenance supervisor who let Summit inside left town yesterday. Vale, standing nearby, immediately moved away to make a call. Daniel looked at Laura. So Maddox moved them. No, she held his gaze. That's what everyone assumed. What did you find? Laura lowered her voice. I checked the generator monitoring logs. Daniel waited. One temperature sensor has been running hot for 12 days. Could that be normal? I thought it was a battery problem. And now? The abnormal reading started the morning after Summit's delivery. Daniel looked toward the communications center in the distance. Where is the sensor? Inside the emergency generator enclosure. His stomach tightened. The emergency generator was not just another piece of equipment. If commercial power failed, it started automatically. A low roll of thunder sounded far west of them. Laura followed his eyes toward the clouds. Storm's supposed to reach us tonight. The implication was simple enough now. If something had been hidden inside the generator housing, nobody needed to touch it. The equipment could start on its own. Heat, vibration, electrical load. Daniel looked at Laura. Tell the bomb squad exactly what you just told me. I already did. For the first time since the bus lane, Daniel felt himself wanting to give orders. To move. To take over. He didn't. He stood beside Rook and waited while the people responsible for the next decision did their jobs. The bomb squad found the cases before the storm reached the county center. They were hidden behind a false maintenance panel beside the emergency generator housing. Daniel learned that from Laura by phone. After dropping Grace at Carson, Laura returned to the county center in a county vehicle so she could support continuity operations from the alternate control room. She left her SUV and Grace with Daniel. By then, Captain Vale had removed him from any operational role. You stay here with Grace and Rook. Daniel looked toward the distant building. Laura's still inside. She's supporting evacuation from an alternate control room. No. Vale stepped closer. You wanted everyone to respect their lane. Daniel said nothing. Vale's voice softened slightly. This is what that feels like when somebody you love is on the other side of the perimeter. Daniel hated the lesson, mostly because he knew Vale was right. Grace sat on the hood of Laura's SUV. Rook lay beneath her knees. Daniel knelt beside Rook and ran his hands over the dog's paws, shoulders, and chest. It was an old routine, something useful to do with his hands. Rook tolerated the inspection for several seconds, then pushed his nose into Daniel's wrist and searched for the Kong. Grace watched him. Is he scared? No. Are you? Daniel almost gave the answer he'd given for years. No, I'm fine. Instead, he said, yes. Grace looked at him. The admission surprised her. Daniel sat beside her. Your mom knows what she's doing. So do you. Sometimes. You always act like you do. No anger. That hurt more than anger. Daniel looked at Rook. When I don't know what to do, I work harder. Grace waited. I think I convinced myself that if I controlled enough things, nothing bad could happen. Grace glanced toward the communications center. How's that working? A dry laugh escaped him. Not great. His phone rang. Laura. Daniel answered immediately. Tell me. They found explosives. He stood. Inside the cases? Yes. Bomb squad says the material itself appears stable. Then what's wrong? They found an electronic firing system. Daniel's eyes went to the darkening clouds. Timer? They don't know yet. Thunder rolled again, closer. Laura continued. There's a separate internal battery, so shutting off the generator doesn't make the device safe. Daniel felt his pulse rise. Then Laura said, and Maddox is here. Daniel went still. At the county center? Outer perimeter. He came with an attorney. Why? He claims Summit temporarily stored regulated, blasting material here during generator work, and that it was placed in the wrong enclosure. Daniel stared at the phone. Behind a false panel? Investigators asked the same question. What does he want? His company's property returned. Daniel looked toward Vale. Another flash spread through the clouds. 3 seconds later, thunder. Laura's voice changed. Wait. What? Electrical engineering just found something. Daniel could hear people talking around her. Then she came back. Someone changed the generator's scheduled automatic test. When? 11 days ago. To when? Tonight, Daniel's mouth went dry. What time? 10 p.m. He checked his watch. It was 8:34 p.m. Can they cancel it? Already done. Daniel exhaled. But that's not all. Of course it wasn't. Laura continued. 10 o'clock is also when the county runs its quarterly communications failover test. Daniel frowned. Explain. For about 12 minutes, we intentionally shift dispatch and emergency communications onto backup systems. How many people are normally inside? 41. Daniel looked at Grace. She had heard enough. Cancel the exercise. My director already did. Daniel's thoughts moved faster now. So Maddox didn't just hide explosives beside a generator. No. He picked a time when a generator problem would look believable. Laura did not answer. She didn't need to. The storm, the test, the generator. All of it had looked like accidental risk, but someone had altered the schedule deliberately. That turned accident into planning. Laura lowered her voice. Investigators think the charge may have been intended to damage equipment rather than destroy the building. 41 people don't care about the distinction. I know. A voice shouted somewhere behind her. Laura stopped speaking. What happened? Maddox tried to walk away from the perimeter. Daniel turned toward Vale. Deputies? They stopped him. No pursuit? No. That was real life. People didn't always sprint through police lines. Sometimes they simply realized the room had changed and tried to leave before someone told them they couldn't. Several minutes later, Vale's radio crackled. He listened. His face tightened. Daniel stood. What? Vale lowered the radio. Pike left Carson. Daniel stared at him. He was with investigators. He was cooperating voluntarily. He wasn't under arrest. When? About 20 minutes ago. He walked out through the visitor lot and took his own pickup. It had been parked there since morning. Did he say where he was going? No. Another transmission came through. Vale listened again. Pike's truck just hit a traffic camera. Where? Eastbound. Daniel already knew before Vale finished. Red Mesa. Vale nodded. Daniel looked down at Rook. The old Dutch shepherd had risen because Daniel's posture had changed. Red Mesa was where Pike said the summit cases had originally been moved. A site soaked in years of legitimate explosive residue. A perfect place to hide something or destroy it. Vale keyed his radio. Notify the sheriff incident commander. EOD doesn't approach until the location is secured. Daniel said nothing. 3 months earlier, he would have volunteered, insisted, explained why his experience mattered. Now he simply stood beside Rook. Vale's radio crackled again. The sheriff's incident commander was requesting a certified explosive detection dog team familiar with the odor encountered on the bus. Vale looked at Daniel. Mercer. Daniel clipped Rook's working lead onto his collar. Sir, you and Rook are going to Red Mesa. Grace slid off the hood. Daniel turned. She grabbed his sleeve. Come back when you say you will. There were promises Daniel could not make. He couldn't promise nothing would go wrong, that the night would end on schedule, or that he could control what happened next. So he gave her the one promise that belonged entirely to him. I'll come back as soon as my part is done. Grace studied him, then let go. Okay, Daniel looked at Rook. Let's work. Less than an hour later, Red Mesa smelled like explosives before Rook ever left the vehicle. That was the problem. The old quarry had been blasted for years. Residue lived in the soil, the equipment, the storage sheds, the work clothes, even the rusting machinery. Daniel could not let Rook wander through the site and treat every change in behavior as meaningful. This required the same discipline that had started the entire night. Trust without forcing an answer. The sheriff's deputies had located Pike's truck near an abandoned maintenance road. The driver's door stood open. The keys were inside. Pike was gone. An EOD technician briefed Daniel. We're looking for another black case. Same general configuration as the county devices. If he gives a clear final response, mark it and back out. Nobody touches anything. Daniel nodded. Rook drank from a collapsible bowl. Gray showed around Rook's muzzle now, 8 years old and still watching Daniel, still ready. Daniel clipped on the long lead. Seek. Rook entered the first equipment bay. His nose worked constantly. He showed interest near an old blasting cabinet and moved on. Another reaction came near a stack of drilling equipment, but there was no final response. Daniel said nothing. He did not steer the leash. did not slow Rook near places that looked suspicious, did not decide what he wanted the dog to find. At the second shed, Rook investigated several old explosive storage containers, then continued. Daniel's breathing eased. The dog was sorting through contamination. At the third structure, Rook stopped 20 feet from a faded utility trailer. His mouth closed. Daniel felt the tension change through the lead. Rook moved left, circled once, caught the wind, and worked toward the rear door. Then he sat. Daniel's heart hit once against his ribs. Good. He rewarded him, backed away, raised one hand. EOD. The technicians moved forward. Daniel brought Rook behind an armored vehicle. His phone read 9:42 p.m. at the county center. The suspicious device still had not been rendered safe. 18 minutes remained until the scheduled failover, the time someone had deliberately chosen. That did not make it a detonation time. Daniel reminded himself of the rule that had carried him this far. Professionals did not guess. Then a deputy shouted from above the trailer, "Hands! Show me your hands!" Daniel turned. Warren Pike emerged from behind an old loader. He looked destroyed. He had no weapon and made no attempt to run. He looked like a man who had reached the end of every bad decision he had made. The deputies ordered him down. Pike complied immediately. As they approached, he looked past them toward Daniel. "Don't open that case." Daniel stayed where he was. "What do you know?" Pike's voice cracked. "It's the test unit." One of the EOD technicians stopped moving. "What test?" Pike swallowed. "Maddox had a test unit built here first." "A test unit for what?" "Same basic setup. He wanted to know whether he could cripple the generator controls and make the failure look mechanical." The night suddenly became very quiet. Daniel kept his voice level. Pike looked at the dirt. "Summit's dying." Daniel said nothing. Pike continued. "They lost 2 quarry contracts. Then another construction job got delayed. The bank froze their equipment line." The details Daniel had heard earlier snapped into place. Idle machinery, lost work, Army contracts, 83 employees. Maddox hadn't been talking about families simply to manipulate them. He had been telling the truth, just not all of it. "How bad?" Daniel asked. "Payroll was maybe 6 weeks from failing." Pike looked toward the utility trailer. Maddox said if the county's generator failed during the scheduled communications test, Summit would be first in line for emergency repairs because they already serviced the equipment. Daniel understood. Create the failure. Make it look mechanical. Then get paid to fix it. Pike nodded. And if the emergency job led to the replacement contract, Summit survives. Daniel stared at him. 41 people were scheduled to be inside. He said the charge was small. Explosives beside critical emergency equipment are not small. "I know. Did you know what the cases were when you transported them?" "Not at first." "When did you find out?" "Yesterday." Daniel felt his anger sharpen. "And you still stayed quiet." Pike closed his eyes. "My wife needs my insurance." Daniel said nothing. "Maddox told me if Summit went under, everyone lost coverage. He knew what that meant for me. Fear disguised as responsibility." Daniel knew something about that. Not the crime, but the lie people told themselves when they believed controlling one danger justified creating another. "Why come here tonight?" "I thought the test unit could prove Maddox planned everything." "Why not tell investigators?" Pike laughed once. Empty. "Because then I had to explain why I spent 6 months moving cases I knew I shouldn't ask about." No answer could make that better. An EOD technician stepped closer. "We need configuration details." Pike pointed toward the trailer. "The test unit is inside the black transport case. There's a blue inner case. I can tell your bomb team what to look for." The technician moved Pike away from Daniel and began relaying the identifying details directly to the county bomb squad. Daniel checked his phone. It was 9:49 p.m. Rook suddenly stood. Daniel looked down. The dog wasn't alerting. He was watching Daniel. Daniel realized he'd pulled the leash tight without noticing. He loosened his hand. Easy. Rook sat again. Daniel looked at the dog's gray muzzle. For years, Daniel had confused trust with certainty. Trust your instincts, trust your training, trust your dog. But Rook had never asked him for certainty. Only room to work. Rook found odor. Herrera tested residue. Investigators followed evidence. Bomb technicians handled devices. Every person had a lane. Trust meant allowing each of them to do the job they had trained to do without turning fear into conclusions. The radio crackled. Daniel checked the time. It was 9:56 p.m. Captain Vale's voice came through. County device rendered safe. Daniel closed his eyes. 4 words. That was all. No explosion, no last-second heroics, just trained people completing their jobs before the clock became relevant. Daniel let out the breath he'd been holding, then called Laura. She answered immediately. It's safe, he said. I know. Neither spoke for a moment. Grace with Vale? Yes. Another pause. Daniel? Yeah? Come home when your part is done. Daniel looked at Rook. I will. Investigators obtained warrants that night. Evidence from Red Mesa, the county generator enclosure, Pike's statements, access records, financial documents, recovered communications, and the test device tied the plan together. Cole Maddox was arrested. The maintenance supervisor who had taken money to provide after-hours access was located 2 days later. Summit's contracts were suspended. Months later, Maddox pleaded guilty to federal explosives violations, bribery-related offenses, and attempted destruction of county property. Pike cooperated. It did not erase 6 months of choices. Prosecutors did not pretend it did. But his information about the test unit helped bomb technicians understand the county device before anyone was hurt. Daniel's review was more complicated than he expected. Captain Vale documented both truths. Daniel had contacted Laura outside the investigative chain. That had been a mistake. Daniel had also accepted correction, stepped back when ordered, respected EOD authority, and never transformed Rook's behavior into claims the dog could not make. That mattered too. 3 months later, Rook retired. Daniel adopted him that afternoon. Grace attended the small ceremony. When the kennel master removed Rook's working collar for the last time, the Dutch shepherd stared at him for several seconds, then immediately searched Daniel's belt for the Kong. Grace laughed. He thinks retirement is a scam. Daniel handed her the toy. Rook followed Grace without hesitation. That evening, Daniel cooked steaks in the backyard. Laura dropped Grace off. She stayed for coffee. Nothing between them was magically repaired. Some marriages did not come back. Daniel was finally learning that accepting that truth was different from giving up on the people who remained. Grace sat on the porch steps with Rook's head across her lap. You missed our dinner, she said. Daniel nodded. I did. You owe me. I do. Tomorrow? Daniel looked at her. In the past, he might have answered too quickly. Promised before checking whether the promise was his to control. This time he thought about it. I'm off tomorrow. No duty, no appointments. Grace narrowed her eyes. So? Daniel smiled. Tomorrow. She smiled back. Rook lifted his head at the word, ears forward, waiting as though another command might be coming. Daniel picked up the old black Kong. For 8 years, Rook had searched vehicles, buildings, roads, luggage, dirt, machinery, in empty rooms for things capable of hurting people. Daniel threw the Kong across the grass. Rook exploded off the porch after it. No leash, no working collar, no odor to identify. No danger waiting to be found. For the first time in 8 years, Rook wasn't searching for anything that could hurt someone. He was simply chasing his toy. If you enjoyed Rook's story, subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments, would you have trusted Rook after EOD and another detection dog had already cleared the bus?